So let's now turn our attention to goals. And if strategies are the how of how we're going to meet our objectives, our goals are what those objectives are. And a book, because it's a textbook, it gets a bit bogged down in terminology and describing things rather than teaching us how to actually do things. But let's work through what they have to say with a little bit of a few ideas about how we might actually use this content in real life. So goals, simply stated, are our actual targets or objectives. So the things that we want to have as a result of the strategies that we're deploying. So this might be things like increasing our sales figures or signing a particular band or selling out our event, whatever it is. It's the actual things that we can say have been accomplished at the end. And then plans are the actual documents that we use to outline how they're going to be met through our strategies. And we'll dive into plans in our next video. And so we kind of get this terminology as well around the difference between stated goals and real goals. And I'm sure you've all experienced this in some workplace or in some organizational setting where we have what are known as the stated goals. So this is what the organization or a manager says they want. So they want to have X, Y, and Z achieved. But then what actually happens in real life can be quite different. And so, you know, we might have a stated goal that we're a very collaborative organization that encourages people to work together and have a very collegiate workplace, but in reality, everyone's really competitive and it's really backstabbing and not so nice a place to work. Or we can have what we call goal conflicts, which is where there's different interpretations around what the goals are, or different pressures or perceptions are leading people to state goals in ways that don't align with other levels of the company. So here we've got a few little examples where we've got the top management, so maybe the CEO and the board, saying we need to improve the company's performance. And they may have a specific idea in mind about that, but it's a bit vague, right? So what kind of performance? Are they talking about the financial performance? Are they talking about the productivity? Are they talking about customer satisfaction? All these are different ways of understanding performance. And so if they haven't stated it very clearly, it's going to be very difficult for people downstream of them to interpret what that means. Or even if they have stated it, it could be that what then happens in reality is that different managers downstream get pressure that isn't aligned to that. So let's say the company is really about trying to improve customer satisfaction, but then managers are getting pressure to just pump out more product faster and faster, which might mean they're not delivering on quality. And so we get these goal conflicts that happen. And here we can see, you know, the top level saying they want to increase performance or improve performance. Then we have our division manager focusing in on profits and improving the profits for their division. So perhaps so that they look good, that they're a profitable division. And then the next level down is saying that they want to increase the profits and who cares why, you know, so that might mean just slashing the costs of their input materials and making really shoddy products that they're still selling at that higher price point. And so the quality is now poor and customers are going to be dissatisfied, but the company is going to be profitable in the short term because they're still selling that product at that higher price, even though the quality has gone down. And then at the individual employee level, they might just be feeling that they're getting pressure to just make more, you know, so let's just pump out more and more and more and not worry about the quality. And so you see that then there's this misalignment between what the company is stating they want to achieve at this top level, which is about improving performance. But at these lower levels, this is kind of getting reinterpreted or misinterpreted. So we also have these three different approaches to goal setting. First of all is the idea of the very top down. So we might call this trickle down goal setting, where the managers at the top say this is what our goals are going to be, and then that flows down to each level of the organisation, and they essentially tell each level of the organisation what their goals are going to be for whatever period. The means ends is a more coordinated and networked approach. So you might have different department heads come together and sort of decide what the different goals are going to be and how they're going to work together to enable each other to work to achieve each other's goals. And then our third approach is what's called management by objectives. And it's a slightly more complex one. So I've included a video on Student Web that tells you specifically about management by objectives. So go in and have a look at that. But it's a much more common one that's used now, where you have people come together and it actually involves employees a lot more, where there's a process of mutual goal setting at a team level to integrate everyone's goals together and also help manage employee performance, as well as help empower and tap into more of those intrinsic goals for employees by helping them have some ownership over those goals. So take a look at that video on Student Web as well. So then we get into what do we mean by a good goal, and how do we understand a goal that is likely to be achievable and come off. So there's these factors that they outline here about, if we're going to state a goal, they've referred to it as a well-written one, and written down is, as you'll see there, one of the key factors. And so when we're writing down goals, you've probably heard of the SMART framework. So SMART being an acronym for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, or sometimes it's called realistic, the R, and T for time-bound or timely. And so this is a sort of variation on that idea. But essentially what we want to do is write down our goals, but firstly in terms of outcomes rather than actions. So it's more about what do we want to achieve rather than how might we achieve it. Because we can often start, giving people goals to deliver good customer service, and that might be interpreted more in terms of how they do it rather than the outcome of the customer being satisfied, and then what the features of a satisfied customer might be. We want to make sure that those goals are measurable and quantifiable, so that there's no sort of vagaries around it, and also that the person can demonstrate that they've achieved it. So it's very difficult if we've got something like deliver good customer service unless we're measuring that in some way, either by asking customers, getting feedback, doing some kind of observation with feedback back to the person, and an ability for them to actually understand if they're doing it well or not, and if they have achieved or are achieving that goal. We also want it to have a clear time frame. So again, if a goal that is just sort of, oh yeah, whenever, is not going to be as effective or deliverable as something where we've got a clear and manageable time frame. And if we've got something that is on a long time frame, it's usually a really good idea to try and break it into chunks, because as human beings, we like to accomplish things. And so if we have a very long time frame on a goal, it becomes very difficult for us to feel that sense of achievement as we go along. And it also becomes difficult to measure it, because if we've got a long time frame, how are we going to know if we're getting there unless we've got ways to measure along the way? We also want our goals to be challenging yet attainable. So generally speaking, people like to achieve goals. And if goals are too easy or too routine and repetitive, we tend to become quite bored. And so there's a bit of a kind of Goldilocks zone between goals that are not challenging enough and goals that are too challenging. And again, if we've got a very difficult, challenging goal, we want to be able to break it up into steps, or let's call it steps up the mountain, perhaps, of things that we can see, help us see as attainable steps in the direction of that overall, what we might call an Everest goal. And then we obviously want to write them down, one, so that we're both on the same page on the goal that we've written. Say if we're working with a staff member or we're working with another manager, we both want to have a clear understanding of that goal. But we also want to make sure that we don't forget it. Brains aren't as good as we think they are. We tend to forget things. So we need to write it down and then have it accessible to us so that we can be reminded and help track against that goal as well. And then, you know, as would be kind of sensible, we want to make sure that the people who actually are involved or impacted in some way about that goal have an understanding of what that goal is. Partly so that they're aware of any impacts that it may have on them, but also so that they can then potentially contribute. So if we've got a more coordinated approach to goals and goal achievement, one, it's going to help build the camaraderie in the team and that collegiate and collaborative approach. But also we're going to have people understanding why certain things are being done because of those particular goals that are being set through the organisation. So we now get our sort of steps as a manager for how we might want to approach setting goals. And so first of all, we want to be clear on what our organisational mission is. So we've talked about that in some of these previous videos, getting clear alignment to where the organisation is headed and what it is about. And then if we're working with employees, which we typically would be as managers, what are their key job tasks? So again, how can we align both the employees' job tasks and what they're all about and what their job is designed for to the organisation's overall mission, and how can we align those goals? We want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what our available resources are. Yep, so there's no point asking someone to fly to the moon if we don't have a rocket ship available to them. And similarly, we might underestimate what resources are available to us. So we want to be able to have a bit of an idea of what's going to be attainable based on the resources that are available to us. And so then we want to determine those goals either on our own, or perhaps we get our employee to start to think about the goals on their own and then work with them together, or even better, to do it with input from others in a collaborative sense, so that different people are getting their own goals set in a coherent way with others. Then we're going to make sure that the goals are well written, so using that SMART formula so that we have a clear, all the different components there that mean that our goals are going to be clear, measurable, time-bound, etc., etc. And then they're communicated to those who need to know them. And then having that feedback mechanism is really important. So in management, we sometimes talk about the idea that you get what you measure, and also the idea that you can't manage what you can't measure. So these are kind of maxims in management that they're not 100% true 100% of the time. But we want to be sort of thinking about this idea of how do we actually check if the goal is in progress, and have feedback mechanisms both external to whoever is responsible for the goal, but also for that person who is responsible, and having mechanisms for them to feed back their progress and any problems that they're having achieving that goal, so that we can both assess the goal progress and recalibrate if necessary, perhaps bring them more resources if needed, or if the goal is kind of seeming like it's no longer aligned to the mission or anything like that, we can shift things a little bit. And then we also want to have rewards linked to goal attainment. So again, this idea that often what we have is people are given goals, and then the attainment of those goals is either invisible because it's not measurable, or we have goals that kind of can't really be attained, and then people aren't rewarded for them. And so we want to have a way of either celebrating the achievement of a goal, or giving people some kind of reward. So it might be, different things like bonuses or thank yous or whatever it is, that just helps cement for that person that what they've done has made a difference in the organisation, has made a contribution, and that they matter. And these things will help your staff member then become more intrinsically aligned to the satisfaction of those goals because they feel good doing them. So our next thing that we're going to have a look at is the concept of plans, which is the written documents that we produce in order to achieve our goals.